Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. This is a platform where we get curious about all things gender, sex and sexuality, as well as feminism, the inclusive kind, mental health and kink, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. Come with us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I identify as a cisgender woman and my pronouns are she and her. In this episode, I'm speaking to ALYS WILFRED, or Fred for short, for the second time, just over 20 months after our first conversation in December 2018, which was episode 2 of the podcast. Fred's pronouns are still they, them, or ze, zer, or he, him if you insist, and they identify as transmasculine, non-binary and gender fluid. We talk about the minor and major effects of testosterone or T injections, including voice changes and mental health, body dysmorphia versus gender dysphoria, recovering from top surgery and being topless, options for bottom surgery, phalloplasty versus metoidioplasty or meta for short, and why the term sex change doesn't do it justice. It was recorded on the 25th of August 2020. Now let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome. What's your name?
Hi, so I am ALYS WILFRED, and I am back. This is a recording.
That's right. So, the last time we spoke, or the episode we recorded, was in, I believe it was December 2018. So that is quite a while ago. So, yeah, that's like a year and a half ago, a bit more. So, tell us what's been happening.
So when we last spoke, I was about to start hormone replacement therapy in testosterone. And I was a couple of weeks away from that. So now I've been on that for nearly 2 years. I've also had some gender confirming surgery, top surgery, as it's called, a bilateral mastectomy, which was back in March this year. So the sort of physical state of my being has changed a lot. My voice, I'm sure anyone listening can tell, has dropped an awful amount. So it's been a time of real, quite intense change. People quite often call it second puberty, and it's felt a lot that way. Let's be honest.
Oh, that sounds bad. I mean, I remember the first one I had, and that was bad enough, to be fair. So, what's that been like?
It's been intense. I'm not going to lie, but it was. It's very odd. Hormones have, I think, a much bigger part to play in our mental health than people realise. Something I noticed after I had my first T-shot was just this, about 10 minutes later, just this sense of enormous calmness and well-being, just sort of tingling through. And I can tell when I'm getting towards the end of a cycle because I get really tired and a bit irritable and sometimes a bit weepy. So it's quite interesting. I've got a 28-day cycle still, which is familiar at least.
You mean between injections? Are you still having injections?
Yeah, so they're 4 weekly, so yeah, it's
okay. And
I mean, I could get very technical about all of it because it's but
feel free to get a bit technical, like anything that you think is sort of useful for people to know and understand about it, really.
So the drug I'm on is called Sustanon, which is a synthetic testosterone, and it's an intramuscular injection every 4 weeks as sort of your baseline, and then they adjust your levels regarding on that. I haven't been able to have my levels checked this summer, which was meant to happen, but my last 2 lots have been normal, so they say about 4 weeks seems to be about right for me. And what that does is that then suppresses my estrogen cycle, so I don't menstruate anymore, and makes the sort of dominant sex hormone in my body testosterone. But with a cis guy, the testosterone tends to be highest in the morning, peak then, and then drop off gradually through the day and have this very sort of jagged cycle. But obviously, if you're having 4 weekly injections, you have this sort of large peak at the beginning of the month that slowly drops off. And it's quite interesting following that. But as I say, the 28-day hormone cycle is quite familiar to anyone who's been through what they call female puberty.
Yeah. What else have you noticed since taking testosterone? Has anything else major changed? Because you said about hormones having a very big influence on mood. So what else have you noticed?
So my mental health is a lot better. I don't get so much anxiety anymore. I feel just a lot more comfortable. It's odd, before I went on HRT, I kind of sort of referred to it as magic tea. Everyone seemed to act like it solved all their problems. And what I didn't realise is that it sort of does. It's the most remarkable stuff. It's almost like I've been running on slightly the wrong fuel. You know how in old cars, if you put premium fuel in once in a while, they quite like it?
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit like that. It's like my body's going, yep, no, that was the stuff. We just didn't have enough of that. Here, have fewer personality disorders.
That's nice. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really lovely. So yeah, I get tired less often. I get less anxious. I'm less depressed. I mean, I still have depression. It's not like magically cured it, but it's much easier to manage. Yeah, and then obviously there's all the physical changes. So yeah, my voice broke, which was probably the hardest bit of it for me, and it's still not back to. I still don't have the control and the sort of possession of it that I used to have. I don't always know where my voice is, and that's still kind of an ongoing process. I've gained a fair bit of muscle mass, which is always really nice. Exercise works better with a high T level, which feels very unjust. I'm hairier, which is a mixed blessing. Smellier, so much smellier. God, I have to shower probably about twice a day now.
Really?
Yeah, oh God, it's so bad, honestly. Before I had top surgery, so last summer, I'd be wearing my binder, and there was no way my body could be cool enough. You run hotter on testosterone. It's only by a little bit, but it makes a difference. If you've got that sort of tight, restricting garment on, you just sort of melt. It's horrible. But facial hair, which is a win, and I haven't gone bald, which is also a win, because that's one of the risks. But yeah, it's just that. It's odd. People quite often talk about tea as it's quite an aggressive hormone. It doesn't make you aggressive as a person, but it enacts change. Everybody has both estrogen and testosterone in their bodies, but testosterone is a very active hormone, so it causes enormous bodily change to your metabolism, to your mood, to your physicality. I mean, it's what triggers the male pattern baldness gene. It causes, and this might be a bit TMI, but it causes genital changes as well, and obviously it suppresses your estrogen, so it stops your menstrual cycle. It redistributes fat, whereas estrogen is it is a changing hormone, but it's far more of a baseline hormone for the human condition, regardless of your sort of birth sex. It doesn't cause the same level of changes. So people quite often say for transmasculine people, you go on T, and that's the main part of your transition. Whereas I know for trans feminine people, it is often surgery plays a much bigger role. So the big difference I have noticed is that even though I'm still only 5'3", most people read me as male now.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, going back to the voice, what you said about your voice, and that it's a bit unpredictable almost. See, that's a curious thing. So is it almost like you have to get to know your voice all over again? Do you not know what it's going to be like? Can you speak a bit more about that?
Yeah. So it's one of the big unpredictable changes. They don't know what your voice will do on T. It will drop, but they cannot tell you how swiftly, by how much, by any kind of recognizable measure. You can't. I mean, like one thing that people quite often do is, what do the men in your family sound like? But even that you don't know. It's going to go where it goes. So I used to have a contralto voice, so quite a low woman's voice, and very, very rapidly it started to drop, and possibly because of the way I use my voice, I'm not sure. I had a really rough break, and I think a lot of trans men, transmasculine people, because they're using the gels, the testosterone gel, it breaks more gradually. Whereas I essentially lost my voice. I was very croaky, very tight, very sore. Speaking became very, very painful.
Really?
And it just suddenly you go to make a sound, and you wouldn't be able to pitch where that would come out. which obviously for a performer is quite a distressing thing. It's something I rely on, is knowing where my voice is going to come out.
Of course, yeah.
So, and I had some speech and language therapy, which was absolutely brilliant. And it taught me a lot about sort of relaxing and carrying your voice from the right place in your body. And finding ways of relaxing the muscles in my throat and my back, which meant I was carrying it from lower, which gave me a lot more control. But what I'd find was that I'd get used to it being where it was. I had this lovely tenor voice for about 6 weeks, and it was absolutely beautiful, and I knew exactly where everything was, and I could sing, and it was great. And then it dropped again.
Ah, damn.
I just sort of kept doing this for a bit, and it seems to have settled where it is now. It still sort of wibbles a bit, but not anything like it was at first.
So is it relatively stable now? Has it been like consistent for a while now, would you say?
Yeah, it has been. They say 2 to 5 years for the major changes, but it's the first 2 years, and I'm nearing the end of that now. So,
wow, it's incredible. So, yeah, you also mentioned top surgery earlier this year. What's that been like for you?
I mean, life-changing. It's hard to quantify quite how life-changing, considering I came out of surgery into lockdown, which was fun. But it was just, I mean, the drop in body dysphoria, in distress, is enormous. The fact that I can look at and touch and accept the presence of my chest without having to do a lot of sort of mental self-care is, it's very difficult to quantify it for somebody who's not been through it. But it's almost, it's the equivalent of taking off a very uncomfortable jumper or a stone out of your shoe, something like that. Is the persistent pain that you've just got used to being there, stopping.
Wow.
And just the brain quiet of that. The surgery itself was quite straightforward. I went to Mr. Neeshaw in Hull, who he does private work, and he does surgery on the NHS. And he's one of the best guys in the business, very professional, very, very nice man. And it was really lovely. Everyone was very respectful and kind. I know some people have quite dehumanising experiences in surgery, but it was nothing like that. But then obviously I was off my face on codeine for 2 weeks, you know? And the world was being very, very strange. So I've not quite come down from that.
Okay, so you just mentioned, actually, what was it? Is it the terms? I'm thinking of the terms. Is it gender dysphoria and body dysmorphia? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So did you experience both or mostly just one? What was that like for you?
So gender dysphoria is the feeling of sort of unease in one's body as a result of gendered characteristics or perception. And that is a whole other thing. And then there is body dysmorphia, which is perceiving your body in a way that it is not. So that's quite common in things like eating disorders.
Right.
So you'd say perceive yourself as really bloated or really scrawny or really kind of, and therefore you do things to step it up and up. Quite often they seem to run together, I think, in transgender mental health, in that it's sort of sometimes very hard to know where one begins and one ends. And I think part of that is because in your head, when you think about your body, you see it differently to how it appears in the world. So seeing it in the mirror as how it is, or looking down and seeing it how it is, can create this feeling of absolute alienation and horror. And is that body dysmorphia, or is that gender dysphoria? Or is it body dysmorphia caused by gender dysphoria? And I couldn't say with any real confidence other than that it's bloody horrid. Whichever it is and however it happens. And certainly one aspect of it for me was hormone levels, which I did not expect. My background dysphoria pretty much evaporated about a week after I started on T.
Really? That's amazing.
Yeah, I just didn't feel it anymore. And there isn't really a lot that I can say to explain it. It's just that my body was like, yeah, you don't have this anymore. And everything became a lot more manageable. But then obviously there was the physical reality of my body causing distress in other ways. And it almost made that aspect of it sharper, because I wasn't constantly aware of my body being wrong, of my selfhood being slightly at odds with itself.
Mm-hmm.
It was instead that kind of clicking into place of kind of my mental image of myself and my feeling of myself and my skin. So when I then look down and see breasts, my brain just sort of went into a kind of meltdown.
Mm. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess it does. I mean, what you said about the, what I remember from what you just said that really stood out was like having this stone in your shoe that's just annoying, and it's like you can't get it out.
Mm.
You know, that just, I think that is a very relatable thing, and I think most people could feel the horror of that, even though it's maybe a small thing, or it seems like a small thing, but it's constant, like it's persistent and grating, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think I quite often try to come up with analogies for sort of transgender experience for people who haven't felt it, because they say, well, how can you feel you're in the wrong body? And it's like, I don't feel like I'm in the wrong body. I just sometimes feel like my body is wrong. It's like, another example I sometimes use is that when you're walking up a flight of stairs and you expect there to be a step and there isn't, or you forget there's another step at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that sudden bringing to, and that sense of loss of balance, because what is happening in the world and what is happening in your brain don't match.
Mm-hmm. So I wondered about how things have been with your family. How's everyone else getting used to the new you in a way? How's that been?
So that's been, well, in terms of extended family, I've barely seen them because
because lockdown, right?
Because of the lockdown. So that's going to be quite an interesting one, I think, when sort of we're more free to move and meet. And obviously, I'm asthmatic, so I've been not shielding, but being very careful about being out and about.
Yeah.
But the people I live with, my children thought it was intensely gross when I took my bandages off. I did point out to them they didn't have to come into the bathroom while I was doing it.
Right.
So that big tearful reveal that a lot of trans people sort of, they put it on their Instagrams, and it's all very moving, was interrupted for me by children sort of charging into the bathroom when I took the dressings off, and they told me I looked like Frankenstein.
Right.
Bless them. They're fine with it, I think, now. I think healing surgery stuff is quite upsetting for children to see. I don't think they like that kind of reminder of vulnerable bodies. But they were very, very sort of blasé about it now that it's healed.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, so that's how it is now. I think kids are a lot more resilient than we give them credit for.
Yeah. So they're all used to it now.
Yeah. And it's quite hard on a relationship. I mean, there was all sorts of things I couldn't do. So I couldn't sleep on my side for a very long time. I had to, for the first few weeks, I had to sort of make this sort of little throne of cushions and pillows around me so that I could sleep sitting up.
Oh, really? Wow.
To stop me rolling in the night, because that can sort of pull stitches and all manner of horrible things. And so sort of shifting from, obviously I sleep with my partner, and I'm apparently quite cuddly in the night. And so not having that for a long time, and then being able to do it again, obviously when I was halfway better, but not being able to turn very easily or comfortably and getting quite sore was really hard. I mean, my spouse is very supportive and has been lovely throughout, but that particularly was hard. It's the physicality of being in the world. You can't do an exuberant hug. You can't, for the first sort of 3 weeks, you can't lift your arms above your head. And I'm a very active person and quite independent in a lot of ways, and it was really tough having to get somebody to do literally everything for me. But what has been absolutely lovely, however, is on some of the hot days we've had, being able to go to the beach and swim. Now it's better.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, yeah. So how are you with that? Like, you can be, I assume, you're, are you happy being topless, like in a situation where you're all on the beach and stuff?
I think the trouble people are having is getting me to keep a shirt on these days.
Oh, you hussy.
Yeah, absolute disaster of a person. It's, it's like, it's customary to do at least 5 buttons on your shirt up. I know most people leave the top one undone, but it's just really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, that must be very different, because obviously, guys, I guess, are used to that in a very different way, because obviously it's not something that women do or can do or, are allowed to do.
No, and it's been very strange, sort of balancing the kind of innate embarrassment of having my chest out with the literally no one's going to bat an eyelid.
And how do you feel yourself being, like, I assume when you went to the beach, you're topless at some point. How was that? How do you experience that yourself, taking, aside the feelings or the reactions you might get from others? Although I'm sure that, doesn't go unnoticed, as it were. But how does it feel for you?
It felt, certainly the first couple of times, quite vulnerable. There is a huge mental block, I think, if you've been told, you must absolutely cover your chest at all times. It is completely indecent to have it on display. And obviously, then factor in the dysphoria of having your chest out makes you panic and makes you enormously uncomfortable and can lead to all sorts of self-loathing and fear and upset. Being able to be like, no, it's fine. You can just take your top off. Not only are you allowed, you're not going to have this whole emotional backlash against yourself. It was really scary the first couple of times. But then I got in the sea and it was lovely. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually, because, like, as a woman, you're just used to, it's not something you do. Like, you don't just go and take your top off anywhere, because that's just not right. And it's like, I can't even imagine it for myself. So, and in a way, even though you might have had that all changed surgically, the feelings of that, I think, may take a bit longer to go away.
No, not automatically. They don't. They don't just vanish. So that was an adjustment. I think it will come up again when, for example, I'm able to go swimming in a public swimming pool.
Right. Yeah, like the next level of it.
Yeah, because obviously, you're on a beach, you're away from other people. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah. I mean, moving forward, are you planning any other alterations, or are you quite happy with the way things are now and you're just going to see how it develops? I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
So this is really what I'm thinking about at the moment. So currently I am being read almost all the time as male, which is quite quiet in my head. It's lacking in stress, and I admit I quite like it. But I'm not a man. I'm not a binary man, and it's quite odd, and I want to let that conflict in me settle for a while before I make any other decisions. There is also, so in order to have metoidioplasty or phalloplasty, which is lower surgery on the NHS, I would need to wait until I've been on testosterone for 2 years, and then I would need to have 2 appointments at the GIC after that, both of which would be about sort of 30 months apart, given the current waiting times. Bloody ridiculous.
Wow, that's a long time.
It might not be 30, it might be more like 20 months apart and 30 for your first one, but it's just, it's absurd at the minute. So I've got plenty of time to make up my mind. I'm not going to pay to go private for it. I don't think I will, but I'm not willing to sign to that effect, just because it is an enormously invasive and complicated surgical procedure, and I would want to be very, very certain before signing up to it, and I am not very, very certain.
Well, it's kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Good grief. Yeah. Wow. So you mentioned 2 types of surgery that you could have, bottom surgery. So the phalloplasty I've heard of. The other one, what was it called?
Metoidioplasty,
Okay.
sometimes short to meta.
Yeah, so what is the difference? I mean, I thought phalloplasty was the only option, to be honest. So yeah, so what is the difference between the two?
So what happens when you're on testosterone is that your clitoris grows
Right.
to to between 1 inch and 2 inches long. And it essentially becomes a little sort of proto-dick. And if you have meta, what they do is they remove the clitoral hood and they move it to the position that a penis would be at. You probably wouldn't be able to penetrate somebody with it,
Mm-hmm.
but it would look a bit like, and it would potentially, in terms of non-penetrative sexual use, be a bit more like. And they can also realign your urethra so that you can pee through it, which
Right.
if that's a big dysphoria thing or a safety thing for you, it can be quite useful. In terms of penetrative sexual function, it's not really much use, but it's a smaller surgery, and some people find it meets their needs.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously there's phalloplasty, where they will construct a penis, which is a much more intense and invasive set of operations. I mean, they're all quite intense and invasive operations, but
Yeah, it's kind of like you'd have to be pretty damn sure to have that part of your body, which is kind of highly sensitive, altered in a major way. It's like I couldn't even imagine it. Dear me. Yeah,
no,
yeah. So for phalloplasty, they have to take skin grafts and things like that, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas with meta, they sometimes do, but they don't have to.
Okay, so that's something to consider as and when, I suppose.
Yeah. So I'm giving it a lot of very serious thought, but
Of course, and it makes sense to let things settle and like get used to it, because I guess the changes are constant. Like you mentioned, even your voice as being only one aspect of it. It's not like, oh, it changes and then it's changed. No, it changes and it changes again and again and again. And it's
yeah,
like a real journey there. So that makes sense to get used to a situation before taking the next step.
yeah. And it's that
Yeah.
I'm still getting to know this body. I've had so much change in the last 2 years that I certainly don't want to knock myself out for another sort of 18 weeks. I want to be in this body and enjoying it, to see where the limits of that enjoyment are and where the limits of my comfort in it are before I do anything else drastic.
Of course, yeah.
And I mean, it is, since I've healed up, it has been so good. And if that changes, then that changes, and I will rethink. But at the minute, it is really hard to quantify just the sheer positive change that it has brought to my mental health, to my relationship with my body, to my relationship with my life. I mean, there's silly things that like don't feel transition related, but genuinely are. Like, I never learnt to drive,
Right.
and a couple of weeks ago I applied for my provisional driving license, and I'm gonna learn to handle a vehicle.
Yay.
Which is a huge thing. And one of the reasons I think I've never done it is I never felt like a real person in the world.
Wow.
And now I do. And I've kind of got to get used to that,
That is incredible. Like hearing you say that, that's something I would have never even considered. Yeah. And that's exactly why I love having these conversations. Wow, amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds beautiful, and I'm so glad that it's doing more than agree with you, obviously, but that you seem to be thriving with all the changes and progress you've made. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I mean, I think I want to kind of address head on the idea of a sex change. I think people quite often refer to this sort of thing as it's a sex change. You've become a man. It's that, and it's. I think my experience of it has been a lot more as a sort of curative set of therapies, where rather than becoming somebody else, I was actually permitted to inhabit the world as myself. And being given the confidence and the space to do that. I don't think anyone should need to transition medically. I don't think that is a requirement to being transgender. But I think the difficulty in living your life in a certain way when your physicality is constantly read as being at odds to that, when there are very simple therapies and surgeries you can have to realign that, is an enormously stressful thing. And having access to those has been life-changing, even if I haven't had much chance to go out in the world and do that yet.
Yeah. One thing I did want to ask you, which I actually normally start the conversation with, is, has anything changed with regards to how you feel you identify with your labels or your pronouns, or is it still the same as when we last spoke?
No, I am still gender fluid, transmasculine, and non-binary. And my pronouns are still they, them, although I'll take he, him in a pinch. So yeah, it's all the same, really.
Brilliant. Okay. Oh, thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/ALYS-WILFRED-2, which is ALYS, where you can also read the transcript, and you can find out more about Fred on their website, ALYS-EARL.com, or on Twitter at ALYSDragon. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com and on social media. If you like what we're doing here and you want to support us, you can do so by becoming a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open-minded.